Hello! Today we are finalizing the flower panel picture. Or to be more precise, we are trimming the edge in such a decorative manner. It has reminded me of a herringbone decorative embroidery stitch. So let's call it this way too, herringbone edge. Before I start weaving the very edge, I'd like to draw your attention to the way I was finishing to weave the very item. The weak point of such round panel pictures, well, at least in my case, is a joining of the rows. Especially in the last row, I cannot make the point of finishing invisible and neat looking. That's why I've discovered the following trick. I weave the last row not in spiral, but separately. While finishing the last but one row, I smoothen the transition as much as I can. Take a look, please. Here is the end of the row. About 3 stitches before it, I've cut the lower tube of the base. Then I've woven 3 more loops, grabbing 1 tube of the base. After which I've pressed the joint, smoothened the transition as much as I can, and tucked the tail in behind 2 coils of the previous row. I didn't cut the tail on purpose in order to show you. It is the way I finish the last but one row. While weaving the very edge, I add 2 separate tubes of the base in a different point on purpose. I entwine them in such a way to adjoin these tubes later. This way I'll get the row with no point of start or finish. No transition, no steps, what I was actually trying to achieve. So, let's start weaving. I'm leading a tube through, and now I have to define how long my stitches will be. The very pattern depends on their length a lot. Let me show you on the example of such an experimental item. Shorter stitches and longer ones. The difference is quite clear. So the pattern depends on the intervals between stitches of the last row and also on how many loops you are going to hug with each stitch. So let's start. I propose you hug in 2 coils. So I've led the tube through and adjoined the tubes of the base. After 2 stitches, I lead the working tube out, making a loop. And then I lead it under the tubes of the base. Now I have to lead the working tube out here through the next loop. I mean, there must be a tube going out from every loop. It is a hint I follow. Zap and look where it is supposed to go. Here, this way. I've led the tube through. At the beginning I turned the item over. Later it will be obvious where to lead the tube without turning it over. So, the next loop. Now I lead the tube through the next loop again. Everything is quite logical. And lead it through here. Let's cut the tail off to make the further process easier. This way. Hide as carefully as possible and continue working. Zap and lead it here. So and continue. As a result, I'm getting such a herringbone. You can find it decorative embroidery stitch herringbone. I wonder if you'll find them similar or not. Well, I was learning to embroider in the past, so now when I've tried this type of edge trimming, it reminded me of that stitch. So let's continue. I've reached the point where I finished the row. My current task is to make the joint and transition invisible. So what do? Take a look, please. There was one tube of the base left. It is what I've told you about at the very beginning. So I lead the working tube under one tube of the base at first. Then, well, let's lead it under one tube again. Here I'd like to keep you from my mistakes. Here I lead it under one tube of the base again, do you see? So, my mistakes. I wove the very panel picture a week ago. By now it has gotten dry, which complicates the process. So it's better to finish weaving at once. Well, I had a purpose to postpone it in order to shoot a masterclass. So, it is the way I get. A couple of words about tube lengthening. The easiest way to do is in this point. From this side to roll the item less in my hands. I've gotten used that it's more convenient to make a joint right here. In this case it is easier to hide it too. It also matters how moist the tubes are. So While weaving, I don't always turn the work. I'm doing it now in order to show you. Now take a further look, please. We have to make a gradual transition in order to avoid a sharp one. I don't lead a tube here, but between two tubes of the base of the previous row. Let me remind you that this is a point of transition which we have to hide. So, help yourself with your fingers a little. The tubes have gotten a bit too dry. Well, actually that's fine, but not in my case. It's not convenient to work with them. I make a gap between two basic tubes of the previous row once again. Well, I'll help myself a little. The dry tubes make the process of weaving more laborious. Let's lengthen the tube here now. I'm trying to be very careful to avoid spoiling the very item. After this, I'll start leading the working tube under two basic tubes of the previous row. The working tube will go here. Well, actually it's better to lead the working tube between two tubes once again. Here. The resultant pattern is rather dense. Well, once again. It's impossible to make the transition absolutely invisible, but we try to minimize its visibility by smoothing the transition as much as possible. Continue this way until you reach the end of the row. I'd like to show you the way I unite the tubes. Sometimes I just lay the tubes one onto another and finish it this way. However, in order to make it as perfect as possible, I've decided to propose the following way. I've put toothpicks into the tubes, measured the tube length to avoid any curves, connected the tubes, and continue weaving until the very end. So reach the end and weave according to the pattern. this way, here, zip, follow the pattern, and the last loop. This way and here. And let's hide the tail here. I cut off the excess, hide the tail here in the same way. I can cut it off, it's gotten dry enough already, and hide it here. Well, let's cut it a little shorter. This way, hide and glue. That's all. Smoothen the coils carefully. This is the way the trimmed edge looks. A few words about the tubes. It does matter much how well they have been prepared. This time I faced the problem of an over-dried work. That's why it was a bit hard to weave. But if you trim the edge right after finishing the weaving, it's much easier. What else concerns the tubes? Mine have been rolled from a 7 cm wide stripe, which is about 2 3/4 inches. The knitting needle I was rolling them around is 1.2 millimeters thick. Well, I believe I've told you everything. This time the prepared tubes were kept well moistened in a freezer. When I took them out, they turned out a bit too wet. I had to let them dry a little, but I had no time for it. That's why I felt some difficulties with the tubes. But I have some spare paint left, so I can paint the cracks and other flaws I've got. As you can see, the weaving is very dense, which is rather traumatic for the tubes. But anyway, I've managed the task. Now I'd like to show you such a variety. Take a look, please. Let's compare these two works at first. What's the difference? Here I had bigger intervals between the loops in the last row. As a result, the pattern looks a bit different. And one more option. Not light on dark, but vice versa, dark on light. To my mind, it looks rather nice too. The same pattern, herringbone. If you are interested and would like to see a masterclass on creating such a bowl, mention it in your comments, and we'll meet during such a tutorial.